Welcome, IWSA members, to our special Bloomsday virtual event where we will explore the range of premium Writer's Tears Irish whiskeys. I want to thank Walsh Whiskey for helping with the event packages that you received. Tonight, we are going to cover the brand history, style of whiskey, which is unique, sample a few along the way. Writer's Tears was created to honor the famous Irish writers of the 19th, 20th century and the style of whiskey that they would have consumed at the time. So we chose Writer's Tears specifically for this event, given the obvious link to Bloomsday, which is today. For those who don't know, June 16th is celebrated because that's the day covered in the James Joyce novel Ulysses, or Ulysses, depending on where you're from. That day is in reference to the book's main character, Leopold Bloom, and his exploits over the course of one day in Dublin, June 16th. The book was released in 1922. So it's been pretty much formally now celebrated for about 70 years on this day. And with all kinds of events around Dublin, people dress up Victorian outfits, recreate the characters' events of the day, and do readings and other things. So we are going to celebrate tonight by sharing some whiskeys, talking a little bit about the book. The book by James Joyce really honors Dublin. It's a stream of consciousness style, has very minimal punctuation, but it's also generally regarded as one of, if not the greatest, novel of the 20th century. Has anybody read the book?
Parts of the book, which I think is the most common answer.
Yeah,
haven't finished it yet.
Yeah, that's the most common answer for sure. Yeah, I was curious if we're going to get anybody that had gotten through it, or and then I was going to quiz you, have you give us a book report, but that's not what tonight's about for sure. So, okay, so Walsh Whiskey, and it's a husband and wife, owners of the brand, started almost about 20 years ago with an Irish cream, then came out with the Irishman whiskey brand that you may be familiar with. And then in 2009, 2010 timeframe, they released the Writer's Tears brand. And, you know, it kind of stemmed from the idea of trying to come up with a whiskey that was popular back during the time frame when all of these great writers were hanging out in the bars in Ireland, and the type of whiskey they drank. So we're going to talk specifically about, you know, what the goal was, you know, in terms of what they were trying to create, and you know, go from there. So we'll kind of jump right in. But the first whiskey is what's now known as the Copper Pot. So when this first came out, it was not referred to as this, and you know, we'll explain why. But this was a new whiskey, a unique whiskey, at least for now. Again, arguably, this was trying to recreate Irish whiskeys of the past. But at the time it came out, you know, around 2010, there was nothing like it on the market. So we'll do a quick pour here and then come back to it. So slaunch, everyone. So again, this is a bourbon finished whiskey. But really what makes it unique is that it's a blend, but not your traditional blend. So traditionally blends have a large component of grain whiskey. And this does not have any grain whiskey. This is a blend of single malt and single pot still. So again, it was somewhat revolutionary, I guess you could call it, when it came out. But it brings a little bit of a different flavor profile. I mean, flavor profiles that you're familiar with, but the fact that the two are combined and then in different proportions, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes, but you get the familiar vanilla, honey, fruit on both the nose and on the tongue. But when I first tried this in 2010 on a trip, it had just been launched. So I was in Dublin and was actually looking to get some green spot in a restaurant, and they didn't have any, and they offered this. So always game to try a new whiskey. But upon leaving after that trip in the airport, they had launched in duty free, and if you bought a bottle, they gave you the book Ulysses. So I have the book.
Have you read the book?
Of course not. I'm too busy reading about.
You finished the bottle from 2010.
Actually, I have not. So this is the bottle. I haven't. This bottle has not been opened actually, because this is one of the original bottles, and it just. I've never actually opened it. I've just purchased newer bottles and just never actually opened this. So the brand has rebranded over the years a couple of times. So things that you may be able to tell from this is that I guess first off, you can't tell from the minis that you have today, but when it originally came out, it was a screw cap. And now it's a cork. That happened.
When did they change the corks? Mine are all screw caps.
Mine's a cork.
The cork was probably, what are we now? 3. So that was probably 3 years ago.
Okay, my 2019 cast strength is screw cap. My Mizunara is a screw cap.
Yeah.
The only screw cap one I got is the cognac cask one is a screw cap. All my other ones are
yeah.
cork.
It was pretty recent. So they did a whole rebrand, both the Irishman and the Writer's Tears range. So the bottle label looks a little bit different. Went away from the screw cap to cork. I prefer the screw cap personally. For reasons of, so for example, because this bottle, you can see as to how I know when I got it, because it's what I do a lot of times. I put the year I bought it. But a lot of times if this was cork, I'd run the risk. I think, Matt, you do your cork routine. So
I do.
Nothing bothers me more when I go back to a bottle and the cork breaks off into it. So I actually prefer screw caps. I'm not.
Fair point.
I would agree, having had a number of corks break over the years.
Yes, I'm not, some people I think perceive it as not having as much value, but I don't tend to agree.
Is this available in the US?
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Yeah, for a long time.
Good to know.
Yep. So, and we'll talk in a little bit about the whole range. But because some of them are not available. Some of them are not available in some states. It just kind of varies. So, but the other big thing I wanted to point out too on this was when it first came out, it was referred to as, you might not be able to read that, it was referred to as a pot still blend. It was not called copper pot. So that was another kind of rebrand that happened actually before the cork change. because when this first came out, it was unique, and there wasn't really there wasn't anything like it. It wasn't a single pot still. It was a blend of the two, so they called it pot still blend. Then over time you had the issue with not being able to use pot still. Had to call it single pot still, things like that. So they ultimately changed it to copper pot. But the reason why this is all kind of, I don't know, confusing is the right word, but just different, is, you know, what this actually is. So if you look at the Walsh brands, again, as I mentioned, there's no grain in these. So they are blends, but they're blends of single malt and single pot still of different proportions. So the base level or copper pot writer's tiers that we're drinking now, the first one, is 40% single malt, 60% pot still. Now, and you know, to kind of differentiate, when you look at the Irishman range is similar in that it has the blend of the two components and no grain. The Irishman range, though, is more single malt forward. So it's got a higher percentage, whereas the Writer's Tears has the higher percentage of single pot still. And then as you go through the range, you'll see different ABVs and different finishes and things like that. But that's the primary difference between the two. One's more single malt forward, the other's more single pot still.
Yeah, see, I'm surprised at the 40% malt, because I get very little malt out of this. A lot of pot still, but very little malt.
Ditto.
And that, if you know, what could be an interesting experiment, because this is the first one, it's a bourbon only finish. So you could try to do a side-by-side sometime, if you haven't, of this against a pot still blend. You know, like even Powers Gold, for example, because that's going to be single pot still in grain. So you can you'd be able to maybe try to tell what's the difference between, you know, with the grain component versus the malt component, because in both cases, they're both single pot still heavy. So that can be kind of an interesting experiment that you can do. But you get the nice kind of pot still spice on the finish. Yeah, it's again, prices are tough to quote these days, because the prices of bottles have gone up considerably even over the last year.
Oh yeah.
But this was a bottle that you could typically find for around $35. Wouldn't surprise me if it's now in the low to mid 40s. But again, it's going to vary by state. But this, I guess you could say, would be considered the entry level. It's the lowest ABV of the range, non-age statement, but you know, it's probably 4 to 7 year range of whiskeys. The other thing that's unique about this, well, maybe not now, but again at the time, because it was a blend of single malt and single pot still, it's a sourced whiskey. You know, so again, when they launched this brand, they didn't have a distillery, so they got the pot still from Middleton, but they couldn't get the malt from Middleton. You know, so it's a blend from different distilleries as well. So they have contracts, long-standing contracts, you know, to get the components to make this pretty unique brand.
Am I correct in the understanding that the Ulysses label is just a special label on copper pot?
Yes. So that came out last year, and that was part of the 100th anniversary of the release of the book, 1922. So that's why they did that. But anyone, if you haven't seen it, it's probably, I guess, a version of one of the book covers, but it's kind of a dark, kind of grayish blue cover label. But it's the same distillate. Okay. So what do people think? Generally like it?
Oh yeah,
Nice. Yep.
it's a staple in my collection.
Okay, good.
Very nice.
Yeah, so we can kind of come back around to it too. And I guess it kind of can be fun to, again, sample it against maybe the Irishman, to see the difference in when you kind of flip-flop the percentages. Because in one sense, it's the same sourced stuff, but it's just how they blend it together and what proportions. So it can be kind of interesting. You can kind of get a sense of what the malt brings versus the pot still, things like that. But, okay, so let's take a look at the next whiskey. All right, so number 2 in the packs that you got is the Double Oak. So what makes this different from the Copper Pot? A couple things. One is it's a higher ABV, so this one's 46% versus 40. And the other is, from the name you might gather, it's instead of being aged and finished in just one wood, it's 2 different. So it has the same Kentucky bourbon, but it also has a French cognac cask finish component. Still triple distilled, still the same single pot still, single malt, blend, but you're going to get the notes now from the cognac finish.
Interesting.
So I'm surprised that they don't tout that more, because cognac finishes are typically, and this is a great finish for a cognac, but they don't really say that that's what's in it.
Agreed. Yeah, from a marketing perspective, if it was more prominent, almost if it was Writer's Tears cognac finish, you wonder if it would
exactly
better, because they do that with their other finishes. They have a Marsala and some others. Some of those are limited edition. This is a permanent part of the range. But that's a marketing thing, I guess. But it is interesting why they decided to go that route.
Has anyone tried to do a side-by-side with like the Whistler Double Oak or Hinch Double Wood with this?
I'm sure in their homes they have, maybe. I haven't seen anything formally or been part of anything like that.
No, yeah, I was basically wondering if any of you have done it. I have all 3 here, and I'm yet to do it, and I'm kind of curious if anyone else has tried it to see the difference between the 3 of them.
Yeah, well, I think the other 2 you mentioned, though, while being 2 different types of wood, neither one of those is cognac, though.
No, that is correct. Yes.
So I would expect they're all going to be a little bit different. Technically, anytime something is finished, any finished whiskey, you could argue, that originally spent time in bourbon casks becomes a double oak.
Fair point.
Unless it's finished in a different wood, then I guess it wouldn't be double oak, it would be double wood. But so, to your point about why don't they market the cognac angle? It is maybe a little curious because, you know, you just mentioned two. There are many that are out there that are technically double oak. You know, and a lot of them could do that. So if everybody kind of, you know, I guess they've cornered the market on this, maybe trademark the name. No one else can do it. So you'd have to promote the finish. But has anyone else had cognac finished whiskey before? Like the Lambay is one that comes to mind.
Kilty have done one that was very nice.
Yeah, Kilty.
Armagnac and cognac finishes.
The Lambay or the Writer's Tears. Writer's Tears has that XO cognac cask.
Yep.
I have the Lambay and the Bushy Causeway collection cognac. Just got it in.
Oh,
haven't cracked them yet.
Yeah, there's more and more that you know, we're using in all the new finishes that, you know, everyone's trying to differentiate. But no, I think Lambay was the first one to really kind of start the cognac trend, you know, because that was part of their that is their brand basically, to use the they're jumping on. So are there any kind of cognac drinkers out there? I'm not. Yes.
We drink cognac and Armagnac. Teeling has some really good cognac finishes too.
Yep.
I like that on this one versus the copper pot. I'm getting some cinnamon and chocolate notes that I didn't get on the normal copper pot one, which I find a little pleasant.
Yeah, the chocolate I definitely get as well. That's why I asked too. I'm not a cognac drinker, so or other people, if you know, knew what they might expect the cognac would bring to the table, you know, in terms of the notes. Some people I've heard too, like you get almond a little bit. But
they're definitely chewier and jammier in the copper pot.
I think the extra ABV helps as well.
Yes.
Yeah,
100%.
Yeah, so I think these are the official tasting notes. Yeah, so they definitely talk about the chocolate.
Oh yeah, I didn't get any citrus.
All right, so again, I don't know, I'm not pouring my full bottle, so I plan to kind of circle back. And I did cheat a little bit and poured my cast strength kind of before we started, so I could let it kind of sit and air a little bit. Okay, so whiskey number 3 tonight is the cast strength version of Writer's Tears. This, for a while now, several years, has been an annual release each year, limited edition in a sense, comes at a different ABV each year. Based on the packages that you were sent, this is at 53% ABV, which would make it the 2019 edition. I know if you were to look for this, the mini pack out there in stores, in a lot of cases, it's listed that this is the 2020 variety. However, that was at a higher ABV. The last few years, it's been at 54 and change. So based on, again, the label that's on the mini bottle that we all have tonight at 53%, that would make it the 2019 edition. But either way, I think a way to think about this is that it is, you know, the cast strength version of the copper pot. So this one goes back to bourbon, ex-bourbon American oak casks, doesn't have the additional, you know, wine finish. So it's going to be more similar to the copper pot at the higher proof. And, you know, I'll be curious to hear what people think about this one. But so with the writer's tier stuff we tried tonight, what were people's favorite of the night?
Cast strength. Boring answer, but true. But nothing was bad. Everything was good. I would happily drink them whenever offered. But if I was going to buy one, it would be the cast strength.
The double oak was good.
Yeah, I always fall back to the double oak.
I like the cast strength.
Really? Okay.
Amazing. It was the best to me.
Okay. Frank, how about you?
You know me, just the oddball, copper pot.
Nothing wrong with that.
Well, you know what? I would argue they all kind of have their time and place, right?
Yes.
You're probably not going to be drinking cast on an everyday basis.
No.
I was going to say, I'm waiting. But, so, and sometimes you want, there are times when I want just a simple bourbon finish. And then other times you want to bring a little bit of, something different into it. But, there's so much now that's been finished in different wines and other things. So every once in a while, it's nice to just go back to a nice bourbon finish.
Yep.
Yeah.
But so it kind of gives you, so I think their range has quite a range, right? So you can stay true to the, the original bourbon cask finish. And then there are plenty of wine finishes, if you can find some of them to experiment a little bit, and I would say too, if you find the Irishman brand, which a lot of times if your store has the writer's tiers, they're going to have the Irishman as well.
Mm-hmm.
So you can pick up, same price points. So they have their standard Irishman, which would be the closest thing to say the copper pot.
The Harvest.
The Harvest. Yep.
Yes, they've rebranded that. It was Founders.
Founders Reserve.
Now it's that. So, that would give you, again, similar cask finish, just the different proportions of the same distillate. So that could be interesting. The Irishman also has a cask strength version. So they kind of mirror each other a little bit. With just a few differences, but that could be something too worth trying, particularly if you like the writers' tiers. Now, you may find that you like, just because you like writers' tiers doesn't mean you'll automatically like the Irishman, because you may find that you're more a fan of the pot still forward, not so much malt. So it's not, doesn't mean it's a bad whiskey. You just may not prefer it as much, but depends on your mood, I suppose. Anybody inspired by tonight to try to crack open the book and start reading?
Can I
listen to the audio CD instead? I have a 30-disc box set of the entire reading. It might be easier.
Do you really have is it that many discs?
There was a radio broadcast done a couple of years ago, and we bought the box set of it. We listened to disc one, and then similar to the book, haven't come back to that yet. I will say my wife, who can hear me now, has actually read the entire book, so she is far better than me. But I'm more likely to listen to that because it's a dramatization versus the reading of it, than I'll get to sit down with the book again.
Okay, interesting.
I'm almost tempted to go buy it and read it.
That's supposed to be a very good reading, I've heard.
Well, it's difficult. It's not it's not like you're reading a Tom Clancy thriller.
No, I meant that that dramatized oral version. It's supposed to be a very good one, I've heard.
Because they did a live stream on Irish radio today that ran for, I think, 16 hours. I don't know if it was the same one, but it was just a continuous, like when I saw that, it was like 6 hours in, but yes. There are alternate ways than just reading it.
Okay. Well, one way to read it would be after having some whiskey, because the whole stream of consciousness writing style and everything, it might be easier to read if you've had a few, I suppose. But
it wouldn't make it very far.
Well,
you'd make it very far, you just wouldn't remember it.
We may need a few
It
to get
was
through.
great. Oh.
Yeah, well, so maybe we haven't inspired to, well, some of you may be inspired to go start the book, but some of you are also inspired to go try to find some of the Writer's Tears bottles now. Either way, sounds like you'll be having some fun. I'll be curious if anyone, and I was to say, let us know if anyone does decide to read the book and gets through it all, or listens to it, I suppose. But that's on my list one of these days. I've only had the book for what, 13 years now.
I'm in the midst of slowly clawing my way through it, so
Well,
give me about 5 or 6 years, I might be done. I don't know.
maybe I think what I've said is when I do read the book is when I'll open up the bottle that I got.
Oh man.
So that's kind of why, haven't opened the bottle yet, because I haven't been able to crack open the book.
You'll have to do it on one of these Zoom meetings, Alan. Open that bottle in front of us.
Alan reads Ulysses, part 1 of 503 parts.
That would be a very long event. I will be curious though that will be an interesting one. I don't know if any of you've ever done, with something as like simple as maybe Jameson, because it's been around the longest, but that bottling versus say a new bottling.
I'm starting to do that through Irish whiskey auctions. I've started to pick up things like Bushmills, Jameson from the 80s, Powers from the 60s, and so on, just to be able to go back and compare, in addition to just stuff that I've bought like you, that's just, I bought it 10 or 15 years ago, but I haven't gotten around to it yet. So I have an older bottle to compare against.
Yeah, and when you've done it, have you picked up differences?
Haven't opened most of those yet. For some of the other stuff, there's differences, whether it's the recipe changed or it's just been sitting there for a while. Don't know yet, but need to do more investigation.
Yeah, I think, the one that would be maybe the more interesting one would be something like Jameson, just because it's been around for decades. So you could literally do one, or even Redbreast, where you could just do one from each decade and see how it's changed.
Yeah, for Redbreast, I have, I think, 13 and maybe a couple from later that decade and then some 20s, but nothing beyond that. The older Green Spot I used to buy is all drunk, so I can't compare that, unfortunately, anymore.
That's the one that I've done it with, the new and the old, and they were definitely different when they did the rebrand. And I've gone back. You can still get the older one, in pubs where they have the bottle still, like Celtic in Killarney.
Yeah.
So I've kind of recreated that comparison a couple different times when I've been there. I always kind of like to go back and do that. But they're all good. It's just kind of an interesting experiment. So that was us at the statue.
Cool.
And we did not drink a Writer's Tears. We did a Dubliner, I didn't do Writer's Tears because I knew we'd be doing this event in a couple weeks. So I chose the Dubliner blend because that's also one of James Joyce's publications, the Dubliner. So that was the idea on that. But the idea was to kind of stop at various points of interest and have a little mini whiskey. So try to duplicate that for next year.
Was it cold that day? You guys look like you're cold.
No, it was I think a little bit windy, maybe.
Windy? All right.
No, it was low to mid 60s, I think, and we didn't get any rain.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, I think it was pretty ideal actually, light jacket, wasn't too hot, didn't rain, so I think it was just maybe a little bit windy on that particular first day. But yeah, so well, thanks everybody for that could come out tonight, and I will. So happy Father's Day to
thank you. You too.
fathers out there, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you, Alan.
All right.
Thanks, guys.
Alan.
All right.
Yeah.
Have a good night, everyone.